Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Miketz, which means at the conclusion. And it tells the continuing story of Joseph in Egypt. And what we find in this week's portion particularly is the first encounter of Joseph with his brothers, who, as a result of the famine, not only in Egypt, but throughout the land of Canaan, the brothers come down to visit Joseph, actually not to visit him, they come to visit Egypt in order to try and buy food. One of the questions that has disturbed commentaries for centuries has been, first of all, actually two questions. What is it that Joseph was trying to accomplish in his all the different games, essentially, that he's playing with his brothers? First, he takes Simon, Shimon, prisoner, and sends them back and says, don't come back until you bring the younger brother, until you bring Benjamin. And then when they do bring the brother, and all 11 brothers are there standing before Joseph, he frames Benjamin as the thief of some of the royal vessels, and brings the brothers back and then throws Benjamin into prison. Why this manipulation? Why all of this situation? And the second question, of course, is why is it that Joseph prolongs the time and doesn't send a message immediately to his father Jacob? Now, this question actually arises immediately as soon as Joseph is released from prison and is brought to such a high position in Egypt. He could have easily at that point sent a message to his father, to Jacob, that he is alive and well. But even afterwards, when the brothers come down and he meets the brothers and he sees that they're still around and they're still living in Canaan, certainly at that point, in their very first encounter, he could have revealed himself to his brothers and enabled the reunion with his father to be that much quicker. There have been a number of answers to both from traditional ancient commentaries and more modern ones, and I wanted to just share a few of them with you today. First of all, one of the theories that I've heard most recently that I think is a very interesting theory as to why Joseph waited so long to inform his father that he was still alive is that Joseph really had no idea what had happened in the Canaan side of this whole story. He knew that his brothers had sold him as a slave, but he had no idea whether his father knew that he was sold. He had no idea what the brothers had told the father. And according to this theory, which I think is very interesting, Joseph assumed that they knew he had been sold as a slave, that even his father knew he had been sold as a slave, and essentially he had been abandoned, and therefore didn't see a reason to send a message to his family because he believed his family knew where he was and chose not to try to help him and not to make contact with him. Another theory is actually a very old theory. It's put forth by Nachmanides, the Ramban, one of the most very important classic commentator of the Bible. And he says that essentially Joseph was acting on the basis of the original dreams he had received, which he understood to be prophetic dreams, the dreams that he had back as a young man in Canaan, where he sees the bundles of wheat bowing to him, where he sees the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing to him. He understood that these dreams represent his 11 brothers bowing to him in one dream, and another dream his 11 brothers and his parents bowing to them, and therefore he believed it was up to him to ensure the fulfillment of those dreams, and he was going to wait and bide his time until God brought that opportunity before him. When the 10 brothers came down to him, he realized at that point that it would be very easy for this dream to take place. He just needed the 11th brother, and therefore brought and insisted that they bring Benjamin, but without their father. And then he needed the second dream to take place, where both his parents are supposed to bow down to them, hence bringing down Jacob. Of course, the problem with all of this is that his mother hasn't been alive since he was born, his brother Benjamin was born, since he's a child, even when he had the initial dream, his mother is no longer living. So I'm not quite sure how Nachmanides explains this. He really doesn't. But that is one theory. I have trouble with that explanation, because I believe that while prophecy is something that is important for us to understand, to help us, guide us in our ways, I'm not sure it's the kind of thing that we are supposed to be manipulating current events, justifying sorrow. Certainly in the case of Joseph, why would something like this justify his causing additional grief to his father Jacob? There's another interpretation, though, that I have heard that I find very, very interesting. And that interpretation is basically saying that Joseph knew very well, of course, what had happened to him. He knew that the brothers hated him. That is, his brothers, the 10 brothers, not Benjamin, who was younger and was not at all involved in the sale and the kidnapping of Joseph. But Joseph and Benjamin were both children of Rachel, and the assumption was that the hatred that the brothers bore to Joseph were partly a result of the fact that he had a different mother than they did, and Benjamin, of course, also had a different mother, and they were both the children of the mother of Rachel, who was Jacob's favorite wife. And of course, so much of the jealousy then that had come into the brothers' behavior when Joseph was young, he attributed to the fact that he was the son of Rachel, which of course is very possible. It's very possible that indeed Jacob's overwhelming love and perhaps favoritism to Joseph derived from the fact that he was the oldest son of his beloved wife, Rachel. What Joseph therefore is trying to do is to determine, before he reveals himself to his brothers, have his brothers learned their lesson, or are they treating their younger brother Benjamin with the same hatred and the same abuse that they treated him? And so therefore what he does is he forces them to bring Benjamin to him, knowing that his father Jacob will not release Benjamin without the brothers taking responsibility for them, which exactly, of course, is what happened. It is Judah and Reuben who both step up to the plate, those same two that take leadership when it comes to selling Joseph. These two do take responsibility, but even more so when they come down to Joseph, they are the ones that end up taking responsibility for Benjamin. And at the point at which Joseph wants to imprison Benjamin, having framed him for an act of thievery, which of course he never did, Judah steps forward and says, I will take responsibility. Imprison me instead. Just release my brother Benjamin. And it is at that point that Joseph understands that his brothers have completely repented. And in fact, one of the most important tests of whether an individual has indeed repented of a sin is to see when, if given the same opportunity to sin again, he instead does the right thing. And this is exactly what Joseph has done for his brothers. He has set them up into a situation where it would have been easy for them to turn their backs on their brother Benjamin, walk away, abandon him, and do whatever they did with Joseph, tell a lie to their father, whatever. But indeed, Joseph sees that they learned their lesson, and he will know they will stand up for their brother. And it is at that point that he knows he can reveal himself to them, that they can indeed become one united family, all 12 brothers together. And it is in the spirit, of course, that they can then send for their father and bring him down so the entire family can be reunited in Egypt. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat.